In this lesson, we are going to learn about the ngOnInit lifecycle hook. A lifecycle hook is a function that gets called by Angular itself when something happens. So the ngOnInit lifecycle hook is when the component is initialized. So at the moment in our passenger component, we're initializing a bunch of static data. Now, when we actually come to implementing dynamic data, we want this behavior to be done inside the ngOnInit. And this is an important step to put your logic such as data fetching inside the ngOnInit so that the component is actually ready. Now, we shouldn't rely on a constructor function for this. However, we can rely on a constructor function for using something like a service, which we'll come on to in the next few videos when we start to implement the HTTP module. So all we're going to do in this video is simply implement the ngOnInit lifecycle hook. So what we can do is go up to the component and we can just simply import this ngOnInit. Now, to be able to use this, all we need to do is scroll down to our class and we can just say implements and then ngOnInit. After we've typed this, we see this red line. It says that a property ngOnInit is missing from the passenger component. So what we actually need to do is create a property called ngOnInit. So for now, what I'm going to do is actually copy this entire piece of code and we can just remove it from here. Now I'm going to put a semicolon here just because we're going to declare it on our class. If we like, we can leave the constructor and just leave it as empty. So underneath, because we need to implement this ngOnInit, this is all we need to do. So the fact that it's prefixed with an ng indicates that Angular is actually controlling this function. So when this component is ready, Angular will then call this ngOnInit function for you. So at this point is where we can do this.passengers equals this big array. Now we'll just format this quickly. And what we'll do inside the ngOnInit function is do console log and we'll do ngOnInit. So when we go to the browser, we will see everything working as usual. However, we'll see this one console log. And when our component is initialized, this is when the passengers then get bound to the component. So you can see in the browser, we obviously have our fully working application, and you can see this ngOnInit lifecycle hook has now been called. We can click on here, and we can actually see that it's been called from the ngOnInit right here. So now you've learned your first lifecycle hook. We're also going to cover ngOnChanges in this chapter. However, that's for another video. So let's move on. And what we're going to do in the next video is break down our passenger component into smaller stateless components and actually start to bind custom data and fire some events when we make some changes.